I'd say by September, if all if everything works out, we may have a breakthrough in that.
Welcome to the Mark Attwood Show, Adventures in a Cosmic Suit. It is currently August the 21st. And in the 2024, I just thought I'd mention that this podcast is 4 years old right now, which is nuts. And right at the beginning, and you'll see behind me, I've been talking about UFOs on and off throughout the course of this. And if we go and have a look at Twitter at the moment and put in hashtag UFO, you'll see there's a lot of talk and a lot of sightings and a lot of videos about UFOs across the world right now. That's quite a crazy one. Looks like disco lights. But the big question is this about Operation Bluebeam? Which, if you've never heard of that, go and do some research. It's basically the fake alien invasion card. Carol, I'm going to forget the names now, but back in the Disclosure conference in 2001, the man that set up NASA on his deathbed in the 70s, I think, name's disappearing from my mind, but he said that they will play the final card, which will be the alien card, because it's the last thing that they can play to set up the New World Order. But they've got to be 100% right about it, because if it backfires on them, then it will not go well for them. Now, just in case you've never seen this show before, I have spent my entire life fascinated by the stars and by UFOs. I've seen UFOs my entire life. I've seen thousands of them, mainly white lights zipping in the sky, doing things that aeroplanes and current technology cannot do. And before you shout at the screen, what do you know? Well, I was a pilot. That was my first job in this life. I was a trainee RAF pilot. I know how things move. I know how the technology moves. And I've had countless scores of witnesses, including my own children, all the way through their lives. In fact, they've seen so many UFOs with me, they get bored when I bring up the subject. But I've also had encounters, including 20 feet from where I am right now, a huge triangular orange shaped ship, which was covered in hieroglyphics. That was a couple of years ago, which zipped off into the night sky. And this was after I summoned it by communicating with a star telepathically. I know, sounds nuts. Also, from another 30 feet in that direction, I saw a dragon made of light fly above mine and my neighbour's head one night. And no, I'd not been drinking. Not much anyway. And all sorts of things. And I've covered UFOs on this channel quite a few times. So apologies to regular viewers if I'm repeating myself. But I'm also located in the west of Ireland in a town called Boyle, a town which has been pulling me in on a rope for nearly 30 years, which is a long story, but an interesting one. And I've been coming here for 20 years before I moved here permanently 7 years ago. I say permanently. I moved here and haven't moved away yet. 7 years ago. And in that 20-year period, I'd heard of a woman called Betty Mailer. Betty was a fascinating character, not from Boyle, but she moved to Boyle. And she was the kind of woman who would pick up her kids at their public school in a biplane and land on the rugby field. I mean, she was a real character. She set up the UFO Society of Ireland in 1996, I think, because there was a famous UFO crash here in the Curlew Mountains around that time, about which very few locals will talk about anymore. But I've heard stories over the years that leave me in no doubt that it was a real situation. I've also met countless people that have seen UFOs of all sorts and descriptions around this area. That UFO crash attracted the attention of an astronomer called Dr. Eammon Ansbro. and he's a professional astronomer with an interest in these craft, and he set up a space telescope here all those years ago, and he's recorded them multiple times and has written papers and presented all over the world. And he lives in the same town as me, well, nearby. And we've met a number of times over the course of the last year to discuss this subject, because out of all the people that I met in my life, when it comes to the subject of UFOs, Eamonn is the most grounded and the one who has deeper insights into what they really are than anybody I've ever met. He also is very keen to make sure that whatever he captures is irrefutable, i.e., he's not looking for people that have seen the white lights. He's looking for people that have seen metallic craft or real craft and has real video footage, not just of the craft, but also portals that happen to be in the lake near to where I am right now. So it is with great pleasure that I introduce you to Dr. Eammon Ansbro now, who's joining me from just down the road via the magic of Zoom, and will be entering the room forthwith, assuming that his Wi-Fi holds up in this stormy Irish day in August. Eamonn, are you there?
I'm here.
There. Earth to
Definitely.
Eamonn. Look at that. It looked like you teleported into that shot.
Indeed. I'm used to that.
I've just done a small introduction for you, but maybe I'd hand it over to you to explain how firstly you became to be an astronomer, but also what brought you to this part of the west of Ireland and Ireland in the first place, because that's an interesting story of its own, and then maybe lead into the UFO Society of Ireland and what you've been doing for the last 30 years, which I think is extraordinary. Could you explain that for the viewers, please?
Sure. Yeah, well, originally I worked for the Ministry of Defence in the UK as a meteorological observer. So I was at different stations, one of the RAF stations in the UK, and civilian stations as well, Heathrow Airport, Gatwick, and so forth. That's back in my very early years now. Um, I had also studied astronomy as well, and also specifically dealing with optical physics. So when I came to Ireland, I was working for the Irish government for a short while, but I had other ideas, particularly to do with business. So I set up a factory in Dublin, employing about 40 people, substituting all the industrial optics coming into the Republic of Ireland, uh, mainly for multinationals like AT&T, Westinghouse, and so forth. So I did that for quite a few years, but also I had it's an astronomy background as well, not just meteorological. So I do have research degrees in these areas up to a PhD level. Um, so um, I had done an enormous amount of work in the astronomy area in my spare time, besides industry. But what got me to into this area to do with UAP or UFOs back in the old days, I actually relocated to the southwest of Ireland, and there was opportunities there for doing more business, setting up another factory, which I did in the Bantry area. And it was there in 1990, once I established that I was giving some presentations to the Skull Planetarium. That was the part of the Department of Education there. It was only a few miles away from where I was. And it was there that I was quite pally with Herman van Bellingen. He was the director of the Skull Planetarium. Um, and somehow it came up to do with lights in the sky. He said that he was getting quite a lot of phone calls during the late 80s and from the public. And I was looking actually for another project to do in my spare time. Um, and I said, oh, well, you know, Herman, I have a background in meteorology and astronomy and so forth, atmospheric physics, and I said, oh, I'd be interested in looking into that. So he gave me 20 telephone numbers from people in the local area. So I actually followed these up during 1990 for about 12 months, and I was totally confused as to what people were seeing. It just didn't register anything that I knew of as, in the field of meteorology, probably even astronomy as well. Um, so I looked into it further and I thought, well, it is real what people are seeing. And all these people I met, well, certainly significant amount of them were all pretty well established people. They're solicitors, farmers, restaurateurs, and such like all fairly normal people. And so because of my nature, I'm a very curious person, and it's nothing new to me to be curious because even when I was a 12-year-old and I was on my mother's farm in County Leitrim, and people were telling me about these balls of light. And so as a 12-year-old, I was, and you're doing nothing else but bringing in turf or hay and all that. Well, in my spare time, I wanted to meet all these people, which I did. And I actually mapped out where these balls of light were appearing to people, and got quite inquisitive because there seemed to be an intelligence behind it as well. And I realized all the superstition that was going on being a 12-year-old. And but that didn't bother me. I seemed to be a very open-minded, with all the stuff I was doing, even as a youngster. Um, so um, so anyway, just going back to or going forward to 1990. Um, so besides meeting all these people, I realized that, well, there's something new here that I hadn't figured out at all. It doesn't fit anything that I knew of. So I actually looked into the whole UFO area, which I never had done before. And I actually contacted three organizations. One was in the US, the UK, and also in France. And I managed to get databases from these organizations. And from that, I actually spent many hours at weekends going through all these reports, thousands of reports from not just in two continents, but even from other areas of the world. And I could see there was common characteristics of what other people were seeing locally. So I thought, well, this is not just an American type of situation of seeing these lights in the sky. It's all over the place.
Hmm.
So from there, I realized that, and I actually had studied ball lightning and lightning back in the UK. It was one of my favorite areas, but none of this would fit any of that at all. I actually had seen ball lightning myself, visually. Um, but what these people were seeing was not ball lightning. This is another form of um, object, light ball, we'll call it,
Hmm.
that they were seeing. So that was really the starting point.
Yeah, well, but then you ended up in Boyle. Now that was because of the, do I say alleged crash? I mean, it was it was supposed to be a crash in the Curliers, wasn't it? 96.
Well, before I just go into that, I actually from what 1990 to the year 2000, I actually carried out 150 cases. In other words, 150 investigations. I also had presented all around the country, not just in well, Cork, three times in Dublin, Limerick, Galway, these places. And I got an invitation out of the blue to go to Boyle, which I'd never been to before. And I was living, 300 miles away in South Kerry at the time. So I came up to Boyle. It was 90, I think it was August 1997. And it was the town commissioner, Tom Egan, in Boyle, who invited me. Um, and it was actually through another group in the UK who had heard about Boyle and, as you quite rightly said, about this alleged crash. Um, so so I met up with some other guys from Belfast who were into this whole subject, and who actually did meet me way down in South Kerry at the time, back in, I think it was April 97. So I presented some of the cases that that was happening in the southwest of Ireland. So when I came up here, I actually was really surprised. We did a head count, and there was about 70 or 80 people, I think, altogether. It was huge
Mm.
for a small town like this with a population of 1,500. And this was in the Patrick's Well pub. So it was fully packed. People were actually on the floor, trying to
Yeah.
reduce the amount. I mean, it was crazy. But it was from there when I gave the Prezi, it was probably an hour, I think, altogether. It was very much an Irish, situation of UFOs in Ireland, which I did an enormous amount of cases on. So um, so from there, I could see a lot of serious people after, and I met quite a lot of these people eventually. And I was invited up again 2 months later. It was October of '97. And then from there, met many other people. There was about 40 or 50 people it was actually the Royal Hotel, which we all
Yeah.
know.
Yeah.
So from there, I did a lot more analysis of the Boyle situation, and in fact, a theory that I had been working on with another guy 2 or 3 years previously, um, that we could show that these events, um, um, like there was windows of opportunity when these events may occur again.
Mm.
And so the first test of this up in Boyle. Now, mind you, after we'd done many experiments down in the southwest as well, but Boyle was, quite a distance away from where I was, and it was December the 13th, 97, and there's quite a few people involved in this. It's not just some of the locals, but other people had travelled to this possible event that might occur. And sure enough, it did. And it was actually there was even journalists there for this as well, following through. And we managed to get our first recordings. I was using a range of instrumentation as well, like EMF meters, gamma ray detectors, and such like. So it was very much instrumental UFO research that I was into. I wanted to get the data on this. Um, so that, to my surprise, we actually did get a recording of a cylindrical shaped object over Lock Key. And again, to my surprise, everybody was so interested in this because I by nature, I'm very much very low keyed in what I do, and I'm not out there um, with media or anything like that. I don't see the purpose. I'm only interested in the scientific side of this and publishing papers, and maybe at conferences, if I'm allowed, that is, of course, certainly with a subject like this, which has been quite controversial back in my early days. But that actually, that footage was shown to, what was it, about 2 months later, February in 1998, on the Late Late Show, which is a big show.
Mm.
It's like the national show that everybody watches in Ireland, in the Republic. So that was actually shown on it. And yeah, so Boyle was becoming quite a bit of interest for me because some of the cases I came across here um, some of them were a bit better than what I was dealing with in the Southwest. So I felt, well, this would be a fantastic laboratory to come up to. So I sold out and in South Kerry and relocated eventually to Boyle. And so I came here. I actually came here around 1999. I was still doing research here on and off on getting more footage, which I have. And also others abroad were interested in Boyle, whom I told about Boyle. I said, "God, Boyle is an extraordinary place, what's going on here." And I said, look, there's no point me traveling 300 miles up and down, a weekend uh, investigating this, I thought I might as well relocate. And secondly, to design and develop instrumentation that may get us some hopefully significant data on this phenomenon.
Yeah, and during that time, and you mentioned about keeping a low profile, but that was the same time Betty Mailer and you met, and she set up the UFO Society of Ireland, which actually brought lots more attention to the place, didn't it?
Yeah, it was great meeting Betty. I actually met Betty at the Patrick's Well. I actually met her before that, but there at the Patrick's Well, we had quite a discussion, and from there, I could see that Betty Mailer was really serious into this, to the degree that she offered over her house for the December 13th, 1997 event. So there was other guys besides me there taken over her house. She was delighted about it. We slept with 2 or 3 nights there and so forth and got the work done. So it was from there that Betty decided to set up this organization. I think it was originally a name to do with the Western UFO Society, but she changed it eventually to a national one. But the thing is, I personally I didn't want to be um, okay, personally, I would be involved with Betty to do the reports, but I didn't want to be seen with Betty from the scientific point of view, dealing with out there in investigations.
Mm.
So we came to an agreement then in late '97 that she would because she had such a network of people around, it seems that it was easy for her to get reports from people, but also to follow through as well. So I would follow through with Betty, meeting these people. Um, and that's how the whole thing evolved with Betty Mailer. And then from there, she decided uh, that she wanted to have conferences, in Boyle.
Yeah.
And of course, she was a retired lady and she was quite a wealthy lady, from business and so forth. And she asked me, you know, who would I know out there in the world? I said, well, actually, I know a lot of people, actually.
Yeah.
So it was from there we would get together I think it was the Stonehouse Cafe at the time, back in 1999. And then eventually we selected some of the superstars in the UFO area. You name the names, and she was prepared to spend thousands of dollars or euros on all this and bring all these people over. So we actually had our first major conference at University of Galway, and it was a great attendance there. It was certainly about 300, 400, and then students as well. So that got publicity. So that was around the year 2000, 2001. And yeah, we had, you name the names, and they were there. And uh, she decided then that, you know, that we'd have it in Roscommon. Unfortunately, there was the facilities in the King House weren't exactly there, so it had to be at the Bush Hotel in Carrick-on-Shannon. So for a number of years, we had these international UFO conferences, as they were called. They were quite unique, and because you were bringing in uh, top researchers from all over around the world, and so it was quite a privilege meeting all these people over a 2-day period. So
And
that's where Betty
they all
comes
came to
from.
you.
Yeah.
And do these conferences still exist on video?
Yes, I understand they do. Um, some of the organizers with Betty, I was less so an organizer. I was more just selecting, you know, some of the top guys, to come here. But the whole organizational side was mainly some of the locals, and also some names that uh, um, who have written books now. Carl Nally and Dermot Butler. They were two of the organizers, but there was some local organizers here. I think it was God, Kratara, Mary Kratara. I think that
Oh
was her
yeah.
name.
Yeah.
There was one or two others um, loose there that were organizing, with Betty. Um, so
And those
Yeah, it
guys,
was quite a success. They went on for about 10 years until she passed away.
which is extraordinary, for a small town in the west of Ireland, but this is an extraordinary place. And those guys that you mentioned there, they wrote, what was the name of the book they wrote? Plausible, no, can't remember what it's
Well,
called.
the first book that came out was 2006. It was called Conspiracy of Silence.
That's the one.
I think
Yeah.
it was the first book of its kind dealing with UFOs in Ireland.
Yeah, and the funny story there about that and me getting in touch with you is that I asked a friend who knew you, and he said you want to speak to Mark, and you said tell him to read this book first, and then he can call me.
Okay.
I've got it behind me somewhere. Um,
Yeah,
so
well, that's my tendency because I've had journalists on to me way back,
mm,
and the way I deal with a journalist is this, because none of them come back to me after. I said, I want you to read only one book, and the book is The Missing Times by Jerry Henson, and it's specifically for journalists to deal with the UFO era, how to ask these questions. Every single journalist I came across during the late 90s, early 2000s never came back, which was great. Obviously, they're not interested. That was my proof of that anyway.
Are you spiritually protected? Are you wearing the armor of God? Are you prepared against the principalities of darkness that currently wreak havoc in our world? Spiritual warfare is a very real thing. Weapons of Mass Protection is the explosive and practical 5-star best-selling book from authors Abby Wynn and Mark Attwood, who both agree that humanity is in the midst of the biggest spiritual awakening in human history. If you feel like things ain't what they seem, if you feel you are under attack, get your weapons ready now. Weapons of Mass Protection. Practical tools for spiritual warfare. Out now.
well, they're always interested in the Mickey taking side of it, and it's interesting that they showed the footage of the cylindrical craft from Lock Key on the Late Late Show, because I mean anybody outside of Ireland that was literally watched by everybody in the country. And I've met a few people here who ended up on RTE, and it kind of shut them up because they were had the Mickey taken out of them to enough of a degree. But I've met so many people here like you have who will tell you countless stories of encounters down at Lock Key, in the town, all over the place, and all sorts of different stuff. But you're the one who has done the work, the actual scientific work, and the evidential work, and produced scientific papers. But also you've recorded. Do you want to talk about your space telescope, or is that in your presentation? Do you want to tell us a bit about that, because you built that yourself, didn't you? And it, as far as I understand, it automatically detects movement and then films it. Is that right?
That's correct. Yeah, I can show that later on in some of my slides.
Great. So, is there anything else you want to tell us before you go into your presentation? Because I don't want to force you to repeat anything.
Yeah, I mean, although I have one hat dealing with the whole scientific fraternity, all right, which I understand really pretty well, and then I have another hat realizing that I've got to deal with metaphysics. I've got to deal with, the whole consciousness end with this, and that's not within the equation in the scientific field,
Yeah.
all right, to do with this area, all right. That's why you've had 70 years of, nothing happening in the UFO field until the last 5 years. Um, but there's obviously, sorry, I digress a little bit here, but I can appreciate all the noise that's happening politically to do with all this. But okay, it's making some awareness in the field, all right. But the key to it actually is to do with consciousness. So, but that might take a while to integrate that reality for a lot of people.
Well, I think most of my audience would understand that, and that's one of the other reasons why I wanted to talk to you, because keeping. I mean, they're not exactly keeping things secret. In many ways, disclosures happened time and time again. It's just what's interesting. It is about consciousness, because it's so interesting how people just glaze over. And I've told you in previous meetings, I've had witnesses that see them with me, and then the next morning they've forgotten all about them, or they just have there's no jump to the next synapse that says, well, what does this mean for the meaning of life, existence on Earth, and humanity? They just don't seem to go there.
Yeah, it's not just with ordinary folk or some ordinary folk in that audience, but it's also in the scientific area as well. What I would call a psychological perception problem. It's inbuilt with everybody. There's people that are open or awake to this, and then there's others that are closed. And though actually I have come across cases when I was in my early days of investigations where some of these people were closed type people, right? But with depending how close the encounter takes place, that can be a breakthrough of opening up the psychic component of a human. And I have come across cases like that over time back in the early 1990s.
So is it possible to summarize what you've learned in terms of the metaphysics of this before the presentation, or not? Because I find what you just said unlocked something with me, because when I had my big encounter, it changed my life irrevocably, and psychic abilities went through the roof as well. It's really interesting that you mentioned that, because in that respect, it does feel to me like they are here to assist us in our spiritual growth.
Mm-hmm.
Would you agree with that?
Yeah, that's one aspect of it. I think it's mainly the spiritual area, which is you could say, a no-no area in other fields. Um, so, um, yeah, I mean, I've come across such a cross range of people, enormous amount of people I've met over the 34 years. Um, and it's all to do with where people are at. Like, everybody's right where they are. But when you, how should I put it? When this comes into position, it doesn't have to be the UFO. It can be paranormal effects as well.
Hmm.
That's partly the spin-off, you could say, to do with the UFO area. Then depending how hard your beliefs are, it can be could be devastating for some people. And
Yeah.
I have some cases where um, this would be close encounters now. We're talking about really close, where yes, they experience all this and they deny it as well. And in the denying, they actually get ill.
Yeah.
And I have some cases regarding that. I have cases where close-ups of encounters where there's ultraviolet has affected them. They don't realize it, but they get rashes after the encounter. I have 3 cases dealing with that. I've also dealt with the abduction scenario as well. And I've dealt with Professor John Mack way back to do with this. He came to Ireland. He was very interested in one particular case I was dealing with, which probably had really good evidence to show that the physical side to this. I mean physical in our 3D as we speak now.
Yeah.
Right? And then later on, unfortunately, he couldn't do this case because the most famous case of that came out there just recently, which was the Ariel School case, which was in September 1994. When I met him, it was around that period. But yeah, so scientists, or should I say, those physicists or astronomers or astrophysicists, they would see this from an astrophysical approach. You know, they're trained that way.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm the same, right? But yes, you can treat it using instruments and collecting all this data, uh, but you've only got one aspect of the answer to this. There's a much wider reality you have to deal with. You're not dealing with quasars and stars and galaxies here. You're dealing with objects that have an influence on human beings. You know, so it's very uncomfortable for particularly the SETI folk. You know, the Search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence, which I've been in that fraternity as well for a number of years. And, you know, they're comfortable when you're dealing with, say, possible ETC, extraterrestrial civilization signal, maybe, 100 light years away. But when it's in your backyard, that's a different case. And again, you have the psychological perception problem kicking in when it's something in your backyard. Um, they're trying to steer away from that truth to they'd ask for the evidence and the data and all this stuff. But unfortunately, there has been complete lack of funding in this area for the last 70 or 80 years. Where there has been funding put in place, it's usually government funding, but then it's all wrapped up and hidden away somewhere. So like it's a whole rediscovery by all these people now in the last 5 years.
Yeah, well, it's certainly a hot potato at the moment. There's all over social media, there's new videos popping up from all over the world. I mean, that change that you've seen over the last 20 years in terms of, like, you used to get a VHS maybe popped in the post to you of a little grainy piece of footage. Now everybody's got mobile phones. It all goes up on Twitter and social media immediately. And if you put hashtag UFO into Twitter, there's just literally thousands just in the last week of sightings and stuff. And I've talked about whether, the big questions that this brings up is, some people think it's Operation Bluebeam. Some people think it's the bad guys coming to kill us. People think it's the government with all their advanced tech that they're not showing anybody. And these are all valid questions right now, which is why I thought it'd be good to talk to you, because of all your experience and in-depth nature that you've given to this subject. And I don't know if you want to share any more thoughts before the presentation, because I think the reason why your presentation is going to be so interesting, because people watching this, they'll be asking questions now like, what is so special about this town? Why here? Because that's a question I asked myself many times since I've been here, and all the ships I've seen here. It seems like a magical place to be in that respect for people that have eyes to see, and there's lots of people around here that see it that way too. And that's a question I think my viewers will be asking: why here? And secondly, they'd want to see. Oh, of course, they're going to want to see some footage, because everybody wants to. I've been posting sightings over the last 4 years on my channel of just ships I've seen, but they're lights. They're not the ships. They're not the metal. They're not the hardware. They're the moving lights. And I know that because you've recorded so many of those, you have a very strict criteria about what you will actually sort of put forward as a real sighting, haven't you?
Yeah, very much. Yeah. I mean, most of the stuff in the past has been published in other people's publications. I don't have a publication at all. I don't have a website in the strict sense, putting out all this data. It's been very much it's been very much private, but you have to realize, well, I'm sure your audience also realizes that a lot of this has been suppressed, and it has been concern for me way back, actually, but you are monitored, in this kind of stuff. So I have been, how should I put it? There has been interference, we'll put it that way.
Yeah. But we can't let that keep us in a box anymore, I don't think, because I think we're at that time. Would you agree? We're definitely at a different time now than 20 years ago in terms of human consciousness and the way the world's changing. And I think this is the biggest question that needs some sort of answer soon, or is going to get one whether we like it or not. What do you think?
Oh, very much so. No, I'm convinced that the intelligences and other intelligences are been monitoring the situation for a long time now, and it's a matter of how should I put it, as this new level of awareness is coming onto the planet. Well, it's been there the whole process for a good while. It's now that people are gradually waking up to this. So I find it quite exciting because I can see that you have a situation where, as people are waking up to the reality of UFOs and the whole extraterrestrial non-human intelligence area, then they're actually coming closer. It's never the twain shall meet. Well, now it's actually the contacts had been made. The disclosure has already been done years ago. It's just unfortunately, again, the psychological perception problem through programming and brainwashing through the media for a long time, because the CIA was spending millions on this every year to debunk all this stuff, through the media. That's why you have the last 60 or 70 years, what I call the fear syndrome, creating fear in everything. And it's completely unnecessary, but you have to sort of wake up to discriminate all this. It's down to each individual. You won't get it from the press. So it's down to your own empowerment as an individual, because we have it all there dealing with the universe. So yeah.
Yeah. Well, should we go over to your? Should we pause for a second to make a cup of tea and let you load up your presentation?
Okay. Yeah. I'll have a little break of a minute or two as well.
Yeah. So look, shall we hand over to the slideshow, Eamonn?
Sure. Shall I upload now?
Up to you. Yeah. Share screen.
Share screen. Yeah.
I'll just pop the chocolate in while you're doing that.
Okay, there you go. Do you see that now? Do you see it?
Nope.
Oh, do I have to press a number of times on the?
Yeah, you press
Oh,
share screen and then choose the PowerPoint.
Yeah, I've done that.
And then you have to click another button. Yeah, there you go.
Oh, maybe that's it. Yeah.
We're there now.
Okay, great. So,
Slideshow. Yeah,
right.
brilliant.
Okay, so, so do you want me to go through it, start now, or?
Yeah, let's go through it.
Right. Okay, great. Okay, well,
Is there a play button for the slideshow?
yeah, so I'm using the term UAP because of, to be politically correct, as I say, sort of UFOs.
Well, that name change is just well, why do you think they changed the name, Eamonn?
Oh, yeah. Well, the UFO area has a bad mantra, aliens, all this kind of stuff. So I think is the reason for it. Actually, when I had published eventually, I did a presentation to SETI back in 2001, and I couldn't use UFOs, so I actually came up with a new name. I called it Anomalous Observational Phenomena, AOP.
You were
So
close.
that's actually in the paper. 2001.
Well, can we get the
Okay, so I'll go.
Can we get the slides a bit bigger? Is there a button to press to make the slideshow work?
Sure, yeah. I'll just blow it up. Is that better?
No, earlier on there was another button where the whole screen was taken up with the slides.
Oh,
can't remember which button it was.
well, I've made it larger using the expanding device here, but if you like, I can maybe Oh, wait a minute. I know. Sorry, I can see what's
From
happening.
beginning, that's it. Yeah.
From the beginning, yeah, I forgot to do that. Yeah, there we go.
Great. Thank you.
Understood. Yeah, yeah. I'm not used to this every day. I don't do this every day.
No, no, I appreciate it.
So, okay, well, that's the title. Could UAP be techno signatures for monitoring purposes? So the term UAP we've just gone through, but techno signatures is the term that's used in SETI for looking for biosignatures or technosignatures. So that's what that term is used there. Monitoring purposes, that's acceptable as well. So you can see where I'm coming from, regarding this sort of SETI approach to it. There's a number of organizations up on the slide there. Space Exploration Limited is the company I work for, dealing with the space industry, dealing with space communications. There's Kingsland Observatory, that's dealing with the whole astronomical side of observations. There is a website for that, similar to Space Exploration has a website. I put ISA in there because I'm the national representative for Ireland for the International Coalition for Extraterrestrial Research. There's 32 countries involved. I'm the co-founders of that. And then there's a website for that as well. That was only launched there in June of 2021. There's SETI Kingsland. I formed that many years ago as well. That was for the research that I'm dealing with to do with the whole UFO area, but I don't call it UFOs in the SETI Kingsland. There's actually there is a website. It hasn't been reactivated as such, so I have to look into that again. So I'll go straight into the what be sharing here. UFO investigations in Ireland. Well, as I said, I started around 1990. I've carried out about 150 cases altogether. And then from there, I was trying to figure out, how could I get some really good data? So I designed specific instrumentation for this UFO research. And it was the first time actually that I located all this and established this near Boyle. Then I had been looking into possible patterns of UFOs, and I actually came out with a publication there as early as 1992, because I sensed that there could be cycles and patterns to this. I hadn't proven anything at the time because I needed a lot more research done in this area. Another important area, which wouldn't be entertained by the scientific community, is the importance of contactees dealing with consciousness. And again, I took the huge effort into, in those 150 cases, I was well aware that a lot of these people hadn't realized it, but they had been contacted. Although it may be in a subconscious way, some were physically contacted. That'd be extreme minority, but consciousness is the key to this. So I was aware of all that back in the certainly by the mid 1990s. Intelligent behavior behind the UAP. Yeah, I have data on that as well, which I actually had presented at a symposium there just 4 months ago to the International Astronomical Union symposium dealing with beyond life on Earth. And that was accepted, and that's going to be published. And then I've just had the other day an accepted abstract for a paper for a much bigger conference, which is going to be in Washington this year. I'm just sorting out all the wording for this to be very careful about it, because if that gets through, that would be significant for me. That means then, you know, the press, the media will be watching all this worldwide. This particular conference. It's called the astronomical. So it's the AGU. It's dealing with the astrophysical, geophysical side of everything to do with the Earth and outside the Earth. So this paper is very much focused on techno signatures, which is accepted as a session, and that's the reason why I've gone that way. So anyway, just probably repeating myself here, but 150 UFO cases have been researched, and then 95 realized that there's probably a UFO global pattern to the whole thing. Worked with another guy on this. We had a lot of failures using old IT technology. Then what appeared to be a model that seemed to work, wasn't too sure, but eventually this was presented to SETI in 2001. But we had actually carried out a lot of experiments, not only here in Ireland, but also in France as well, where say previous events may have occurred, but according to the model, they appear to be correlated as well. The problem with something like this is that it's no guarantee that it works as such, and you have to appreciate that. You know, when you're a one-person show trying to do all this, no funding, it's really difficult. It takes up an enormous amount of time, all this kind of work.
Well, it's been full time for you for a long time, hasn't it?
Yeah, yeah. And in fact, it's only in recently, in the last year or so, that I've got back into the whole UFO area, because I had to review everything I've been doing. And now I'm at, as I said, I just presented there at a symposium, one of the professional ones, which brought all this in to do with the language that's acceptable, to do with possible global technosignatures around the Earth, but using the word UAP in it. So that was acceptable. And so there wasn't any resistance, which was a pleasant surprise. So now I'm following through with a lot more material on this area for this one in Washington coming up. The year 2000 was when I designed and developed the instrumentation for this. Got the location for this, and it took about, I suppose, about a year or more. So it was fully developed by 2001. I had the concept already worked out back in 99 for this. So I will go into that a little bit later. So yeah, Ireland, as you can see on the map here, it's more for an audience that doesn't know where Ireland is. You find some Americans, I was really surprised. They thought, you know, Ireland, you know, where was that? It's Iceland. Even in Japan, when I was there, said, "Oh, you're from Iceland." You know, it's like, okay, so I better put some maps.
Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, the main work I carried out was in Bantry, County Cork, in the southwest of Ireland. And there's some particularly high UFO active area, which I didn't realize was until I did a lot of cases, which I call the Comhola Corridor. It's between the borders of County Cork and Kerry. So it's actually halfway between the town of Bantry and Glengarriff, where all this activity was mainly happening. And from this activity, I have, it doesn't show up too well, but the blue dots on the map here are the locations of where this activity was happening. So there was a concentration there in the southwest region near Bantry Bay. So back in those early days, I had followed through about 35 cases altogether. And it's from that that testing out a model that might work in this area. This model is not proven, by the way, Mark. It's we have tried it out, but it has worked to a certain degree. But I think it's due to selectivity, and I think possibly dealing with consciousness, because there was one occasion where I had there was a UFO that appeared in the southwest, and I hadn't checked the model itself, and then uh, apparently it did correlate with the model. So it's been very much iffy at times, you know, and it's really due to a lack of data. Um, so, and maybe the model was all wrong, but now actually I reviewed the model and now I'm feeling a bit more comfortable. I think it might work. So this would be, hopefully all this will be published during this year and next year as well.
Great.
The next area was Lock Key, where we are, Boyle, which is next door to Lock Key. And this was we're located and set up the instrumentation near Lock Key. And so here's a sample of some of the sightings from 1996 to 2015. There's actually a lot more than this. When I say a lot more, I mean not just at Lock Key, but also other areas near Lock Key, which are not shown here. So most of these reports I've investigated, and some of these have been published as well under different pseudonym names, with Carl Nally and Dermot Butler, the two authors of Conspiracy of Silence. I think it was in their next book they had some of this material. There was some very good cases. This particular one, which was witnessed by four young guys in their 20s. They had witnessed from a place called Clontequila Castle, which is on the eastern shore of Lock Key. It's right on the shore, this place is. And they were there in 1998 in the evening time. They had binoculars because they were interested in wildlife and so forth. That was their hobby, you know. And this object came over where they were, only about 200 meters away from them. And it was only about double the height of the trees that were near them. And they witnessed this for about a minute altogether. And I've met them a number of occasions after, and they still stuck to what they saw and experienced. This also had an impact on their lives, but particularly two of them, Barry Brown and Mark Monaghan, were the two individuals. But I'm just selecting this particular case because I thought it was one of the best ones because it was close up. I did quite a bit of work on that, thanks to them, which they probably are unaware of, because I was trying to figure out the propulsion system behind all this, you know, and that may be in another video in the future. It can be shown. There's the object or the construct. It was about 100 feet in length by 20 feet. It's on the right-hand side there. That was the flight path of it from Clontequila Castle, and it was descending, you know, towards the lake, and then disappeared approximately where that red cross is. So this appearance was interesting. It got me really interested then, because I thought, well, you know, UFOs, they appear and disappear, but, you know, there's obviously dynamics behind all this process. So I got interested in that. So here's one of the early recordings that we're very lucky in getting, December the 13th, 1997. You can see it's cylindrical type of construct that there. It could be similar to what the lads saw the next year, coming over Block Key, and that was shown on national television. Actually, it was very interesting. The main anchor person, the Gay Byrne, he did ask me how come you could have such an object like this in Lock Key, and I said, well, how did it light up? Well, I said it's there's no electricity in the middle of Lock Key. How do you how do you generate all this power? So he couldn't say anything after that. But then again, it's all luck, a lot of this, but we got a recording of a triangular type construct craft, which I've done quite a lot of analysis on, even with a couple of colleagues as well. So this had a beam coming out of it. We're not saying it's a laser beam, but it's interesting it was red. But again, we can't put our anthropocentric sort of approach to all this. We're dealing with something that's may not have gone through the same evolution as our society, civilization. So, but again, it appears to be monitoring, and I would say this beams have been recorded before around the world. It's some sort of scanning type approach they're using. As I said, this is just a selection. There's many more. Okay, this is fairly common. Balls of light appearing, recordings we managed to get as well. You can see from the graph here, you can determine the profile of the light source as well. All these things, all this knowledge and all this data adds to our knowledge, I find. This was a double ball of light, plasma type light, we suspect. And this was moving slowly near Lock Key. That was tracked. Another one was people think it's nighttime footage, or nighttime you see these objects. You can see them in the daytime. And this is from Kingsland, and this is a dumbbell type shape, slowly moving across the sky, but in the direction of Lock Key, that is. So it doesn't necessarily have to be in Lock Key itself. It can be in the outer part, environment of Lock Key, within, say, a radius of 3 or 4 or 5 miles. So that's 2 round constructs that are connected together. Quite a rare one to find, actually. So just going back to the patterns of research, which I went to a lot, others actually had looked into patterns even back in the 1950s. Aimé Michel in France did. Particularly, he had studied the 1954 huge activity, UFO activity in France, 1954, and came up with a theory on this, which in the end didn't work. Others had looked into this, called the orthonetti theory. Michel again, Jacques Vallée. Even to this day, orthonetti theory, which is dealing with straight lines, do they correlate with straight lines? And they're finding that they don't. Another guy, Bruce Cayley from New Zealand, had some interesting material. He never published any papers. It was always in books, but I've studied his stuff way back in the 90s. And again, appears to be a correlation, but it's not fixed as such. 95, myself and Roy Dutton, we did a lot of work on this. But again, the amount of reliable data was very small, 1,300 reports altogether. You really need to have tens of thousands of reports. So it was a fairly weak model, you could say. And it had been presented in SETI, in San Jose in 2001, but also in 2003, this was presented in Australia at the NASA Origins Conference. But, again, when you're dealing with others in this area, and I would agree with them, that the follow-up of actually carrying out experiments in this, that was the weak point in the model itself. But you could say it was the first theory of its kind ever to of UFOs, is what you're seeing here, this particular theory. But I think after reviewing all this, that, what I presented in the symposium there early this year, and then hopefully in Washington, then I think the theory may get a lot more traction, hopefully. I mean, I think it was somebody on the social media, one of the, can't remember what site it was, but they're saying, this guy Ansbro, he needs about $20 million and to make the breakthrough. And I thought, yeah, okay, that should do it, I think.
If anybody out there has 20 million spare, send it to Eamonn.
Yeah.
That'll keep us in lunches in Boyle for a while.
This is the theory. Actually, it's just the one slide, and it's based on a number of permutations. We're assuming we have a craft that's at a high altitude, up to, say 60 or 70 kilometers from the Earth. It doesn't seem to, okay, when I say it, the craft, a supercraft of some kind, and again, this is all hypothetical, but we used a revolution of 65 minutes, which means that you'd have to use some sort of anti-gravity to propel the craft around the Earth. So it's not at your typical LEO altitude, low Earth object altitude, where the International Space Station would have been. All right, we think actually it's just within our atmosphere, but very high. So it's doing a revolution about 65 minutes. It's synchronized with the rotation of the Earth, all these tracks, and the inward path for one of these craft, we think it's around 53 degrees. But as I said, this is purely a model. For a model to work, it has to work with, certain criteria. And it does sort of work and it doesn't. It's a real mix here, because you can fall into the trap of selecting places and then you find, oh, it actually works, and then other places it doesn't work. And, it's quite frustrating. But as I said, I have reviewed all this again, and we've come up with a 100-day simulation, which shows the whole Earth is monitored by the simulation, by this model, based on thermal and radar data. And I actually will be showing this at the very end, just a flavor of this, But that was the theory, as you see there in that picture, that we came up with. And I mean, I could see that there's some sort of robotic automated probes, even back in the late 1990s, that could be used here. So, the supercraft would deliver a number of these probes and they'd be around for a number of minutes, which would be typical of what people see or observe at low altitude as the balls of light, or multiple balls and so forth. And then you'd have, say, another track which would intersect that particular one, which would be another craft. And again, this is all hypothesized, and that will retrieve the balls of light, so to speak, or should I say the robotic probes, it's another way of putting it, I suppose. Also the morphing effect, from UFOs as well. You can see a UFO, it could be, say, flying saucer sort of shape looking, and then it morphs into, say, like a Cessna 260, a Cessna aircraft, so they know what they're doing, in presenting themselves. Obviously they don't want to frighten people off, so well, they have frightened some people, but then seeking patterns. Well, I won't go to all the stuff here, but it's showing you the problems that we're facing to do with coming up with a model for this. So I'll just go into the next thing. So we're looking for intelligent behavior, looking for technosignatures. Um, and, we've accepted that there are 5 observables. That seems to be of common agreement now. And we're going to introduce 2 other observables into this, which I can show later. So we are relying on radar signatures, thermal signatures. Uh, Subjective observations are not accepted for this model to work. So it would be thrown out. The people, anybody in the committee editing this kind of stuff, if it's subjective, it's not accepted. So that's why, unfortunately, back in the 1990s, there was a lack of the objective data. But now in reviewing all this, we're trying to get as much radar data as possible. It's a fact. Now, even in that, it could be corrupted. There could be, it could be manipulated as well. So we're in a very tricky place, you could say, with all this data. Here's some of the past and current UFO instrumental research that have taken place. It goes back to 1976. Ray Stanford, he's still alive. I only spoke to him there, when was it? About 12 years ago. And others have been working in this field as well, particularly Project Hestelin. That's probably the most long-running establishment for data collecting of UFOs, balls of light. And that was all these have been funded by universities, So Harvard, of course, the Galileo project, the most well-known one by Avi Loeb there, 2021. So there's that, and then there's the first European one funded by a university in Germany. I actually know the guy, Hakan Kaya. And yeah, so unfortunately, I was hesitating there a little bit because unfortunately, they're seeing it as an astrophysical approach to all this. And I don't see it that way. I see a much wider reality. And therefore, you have to bring in other aspects to this. And I'll actually go into this later on, how this would work. UAPX, another organization with Dr. Kevin Knuth, whom I know personally as well. You tend to get it's such a small field, you get to know everybody and meet them. So, and so so we're looking for the scientific research to provide a whole range of information, the physics behind this in particular. So we're dealing with the energy fields, magnetic gravitation fields. What frequencies could it be given off in all different areas? So I have actually had stuff published in this area way back, well, not just 2001, but also I think 2013 as well. So I've been around the block for a good while in this area, So sorry, that was Lock Key, and this is where the establishing the instrumentation. So there's multiple screens were involved in this. This all was 2001 now. This was one of the first images taken or recorded, and I could see the problem straight away. Very bright light source, but how do you get behind the light source? What type of filtering is needed for this? The actual instrumentation was developed in 2001. Is made up of one central hub of cameras. There's 11 cameras altogether, which are offered to the sky. So the whole sky is covered. The reason why there's so many cameras is that you get much better resolution than using one camera. And then a program within the computer is to break up the sky into a grid. So there's 1,000 squares within this whole grid, and each grid or square is 4 square degrees. So anything that actually moves within that square is recorded. Not only recorded, but also there's 2 tracking platforms that are 150 meters apart. and these have more powerful cameras and lenses, zoom lenses of 200 millimeters. So this is way back 2001 vintage, all right? Um,
Hmm.
and so approximately about 40 recordings that are definitely UFOs have been recorded. As I said, some of this has been published already. Here's the two tracking platforms. Um, not only just using visible, but infrared. There's near infrared camera involved in this. And there's also another detector, which is a gamma ray directional detector. And that's on top of two of the cameras, because the UFOs are definitely giving off gamma rays. Um, and, some people have been affected by gamma rays. And so that was one of the additional detectors in there. So that has been operating 24/7. I've actually decommissioned this now because I have enough data now, because I'm going to go to the next phase of going beyond what you see here. And I'll share this later on. This is a lot more sophisticated way of getting close-up data. This is some of the developments we did during the period. We developed. Okay, spectroscopy is so important to this to get to understand the composition of the light. What is it made up of? So you do it through spectroscopy, and this is one of the instruments we've used. Published information on all this. These are two of my colleagues there who have been working with me over the many years. Both of them have had encounters. They're used to the experiential side, but also they have a scientific side of them. One is an IT expert, the other is into engineering. So they're bringing a lot more to the whole process. I think people that would have no experience at all in this area would be sort of, they'd probably doubt all this. But
Mhm.
but if you have guys like this, it's 50% of the battle is over. It's right.
Yep.
They want the data. There's one of my colleagues, and this is another spectrograph. It's pretty heavy duty equipment. There's um, quite a lot of investment has been put into all this over the years. And so we've tested it on, satellites, and this gives you some idea back in 2015. Because if you can get able to record the spectra of a UFO, which is extremely rare to do, it has been done in Heston. They achieved that there back in, I think it was around 2001. We'd be in correspondence with Heston, with all this kind of work. Um, uh, so also we've tried out other um, spectra using high resolution um, imaging, and this is just what you see there is three objects. These are not UFOs, by the way. These are actually stars, but this is enhanced spectra from those three stars that you have there, and so then when you put that through a program, you can actually analyze the lines within it as to what the makeup would be of that particular object. So we've had to do a number of runs dealing with stars in particular and satellites. Because satellites, you're dealing with not a light source, you're dealing with a reflection, where with stars, you're dealing with a light source. So there's a difference between the two. Unfortunately, we didn't record any UFOs with spectra. This is the future proposal of how we should be doing it. To upscale the whole thing using much more powerful instrumentation. I do have facilities under my company in southern Spain. The facilities have a number of instruments that you see there on the top right. But I'm introducing the whole UAP area into this as well. This is the operations from Boyle, and but not just from an astrophysical approach, but I'm bleeding into where the contactee is really important in this, and I'll go into that a bit later. Um, so I know this is not part of the presentation, but I've also looked into the whole communications area as well. But that's a whole topic in itself, how it can be done. So what I'm saying here is that the missing side of scientific UAP research is metaphysics. In other words, dealing with the nature of reality, existence, who we really are. So we're bringing in quantum theory, quantum physics need to be added to new dimensions to what we call metaphysical science. And there's so much proof regarding metaphysics, you know, the intention experiment, the global coherent initiative, etc. So there's actually no escape from metaphysics at all. You have to have metaphysics there if you're going to make any major breakthrough. So that's where I'm coming from, but you won't find anybody else in that arena that's dealing with UFOs, but you know, the Galileo project, for example, or the German one, even Hestelin. I'm actually going out to Hestelin in 2 weeks' time to make a presentation, but they would see it from the astrophysical, but I'm actually bringing in the contactee side of it. It's uncomfortable for a lot of people. For me, it's normal. I've dealt with so many contactees. It's like scientists have to get out there and research this properly. You've got to take in the contactees and go.
You can't
through.
ignore it, can you?
No. So actually, I've looked into this way back 10 years ago or more, a lot more, and how it can be done. And so, as you can see in the picture there put together, so you're you're dealing with a universe which is a wide and awake with all these beings there. There's multiple beings of all sorts, and there's a positive and negative side to it, but it's all down to one's resonance of what you're going to deal with. It's like in the paranormal. If you're a negative person, that's where you're going to attract to the paranormal. You know, if you're a positive, then you're going to attract the Holy Virgin Mary or something, you know. So again, these are all archetypes. So, but we are definitely dealing with something physical here. The extraterrestrial, there's a physical side to it. And there's, you know, as I was saying earlier, it's a whole subject in itself dealing with communications, but the consciousness resonance is a key to it for instant communications because telepathy works, you know, it's instantaneous. You know, so if you're trying to prove this to scientists, you know, it's subjective. But if you're bringing in technology, which I call technology assistant consciousness, you'd have objective data regarding that. I do know one scientist, Dr. Massimo Teodorani, I know very well actually. He's been to Boyle actually a number of times, and he is leading the way dealing with consciousness and UFOs as well. So, as I was saying, contactees are so important. I have studied some, not only contactees in Ireland, which I was privy to, but also I have studied some of the most well-known cases. The Billy Mayer case in Switzerland, 1976. I studied that back in 1991. When I say study, I managed to get audiographs to some of the actual original pictures as well back in 1991. I was told that this was a really important case by somebody who was in the know. The other person is very recent times is Yeltsin Yalman case, the Kumbur gas case in Turkey. I've researched all that out. It is for real. It's a definite craft, similar to the Billy Mayer craft. Interested enough with this particular case, which was only about 5 or 6 weeks ago. He was on one podcast, Eamonn, and no one could find this guy for many, many years.
Mm.
He seemed to disappear after 2010. But colleagues I know have managed to track him down, and there is a podcast came out 5 or 6 weeks ago, and he actually, through a Turkish translator, he doesn't speak English, but he says he's a contactee, and he explained the whole process during his life, which reminded me of Billy Mayer. It was very, very similar, situation. So contactees are really important, and the ideal situation would be that through the likes of, say, Yeltsin Yalman, that if he agrees to it, that if ever he's having another encounter, that there would be, say, instrumentation there of a kind that has multiple sensors to pick up, well, not only the craft, but a lot more detail about the craft itself. So that's where I'd be coming from. So I'm bringing in the science and the contactee into this. So I see that actually as the next step beyond UFOs, call it second generation ufology or whatever language you like to call it. But I see that as the best way of getting data, dealing with the contactees for this. So I'm convinced actually through other contactees, we are dealing with craft that are within our solar system, and they're using consciousness as the key link to this. So it's dealing with the whole quantum universe, quantum communications. So again, communications via consciousness is the link to this. These are just diagrams that I've made up. Actually, this kind of stuff I was doing years ago, 10 years ago, So, for other people, oh, that's new. I haven't seen that before. Yeah, right. Well, I've gone even beyond that as well, because I'm optimistic that I think we could, if everything works out, with also have all the right resources, that we could make a major breakthrough in this area, which would mean then that you have to have the right communication operatives, as we call them. Now, I'm bringing this to another level again beyond what all the noise that you hear about around the world, particularly in America. All right, this brings to another level altogether. And this can be achieved through global communication, setting up centers. There are the right contactees that would have the right resonance for the communications, and this would open up the whole field for mankind in all the different categories, that is. So it's this is all part of our evolution, as I would see. We're bringing into a new level of awareness onto the planet, and in addition to using our science, our techniques and methods and that, for the communications to take place in a much more active way. And I'm, with all due respect to other communications that have taken place using the CE5 initiative, yes, it works all right, but this is bringing to another level again, and in a much more organized way, you could say, on a global basis. So I would see the scientific and an intercultural exchange taking place. It's again, it's all down to trained contactees in how to do this. Even other people that may not be contactees but would have the right resonance, that would be a key to for the interaction to take place with extraterrestrials. So because you have to deal with your thoughts, your emotions, and so forth in this, because you're dealing with other entities that also have thoughts and emotions. Well, hopefully emotions as well. So I see that as important, emotions, and to develop the cooperation. So we would have questions, they would have questions. And I think this is all part of the process of this evolution for taking place. I actually had presented this at University of Oxford back in 2008 without the contactee bit. This was more for a SETI sort of approach, but I can see I had to change a lot of stuff just recently because I could see this can be done successfully.
Mm.
So training the communications operative is key to this, and this is the principles and application behind this. Harmony and balance is key to it because the universe itself knows nothing else but balance. So we need to get ourselves in that balanced way, but to raise awareness for this. Um, and in the training would be focusing, on your dialogue on your partner, which would be the extraterrestrial or the non-human intelligence we're going to be dealing with. Um, I think the more effort one does in these type of things, this kind of research, then I'm convinced actually that they, metaphorically speaking, we're coming closer, for this. And I think this is the way for this. So I see 5 steps in the communications. Um, and oh, sorry, I just knocked it off there. Um, so yeah, so this is really a process in the communications to do with a cycle of understanding how it can be done. So your integration of the knowledge, learning, exchange of information. Um, I have a lot of details on this, how this can be done, the whole practical side to it. But this is just giving you a flavor, a summary of where I'm coming from, how you can bring this to the next step. It's very real, it can be done. And but the way science is dealing with it at the moment, they're not going to do it. It's not going to happen the way they're doing it. So now we'll just go on to UFO propulsion, the 5 observables, which has been a common agreement uh, uh, around, and the sudden instantaneous acceleration, hypersonic velocities without any signatures, meaning any,
Yeah.
fumes coming off the craft, low observability, transmedium travel, going into water without any splash, for example, positive lift. And 2 others would be propulsion generation. Uh, we're here, I'll be presenting actually in Hesselin, dealing with gravitational lensing. This is an effect due to the generation from the propulsion system. Intelligent behavior monitoring is the other one. So gravitational lensing, this is just an animation of if you have a black hole passing through the galaxy, you get this warping effect in space-time. So similarly, the UFOs are doing the same thing in their generation of power. They also create a space-time warp or a bubble in front of them and also behind them as well. And this is how you can get this instantaneous movement, from the UFO. Here's an example from broken down into slow motion, that is. This is from the Aquildilla case in Puerto Rico there in 2013. And this is from Homeland Security cameras, so FLIR cameras. So I'm only dealing with recordings from recognized, categorized data, not somebody's video and, is it for real or not? This is very much for real. So actually, when you look at this particular object, you can see the lensing effect as it passes through some of the clouds, I think it is there. You can see a distortion for the front and also the back. I'll show 1 or 2 others actually. Might be a bit clearer. You can see now the distortion as it passes. That's ground level there, but it's just over the ground. But you can see a slight distortion there taking place. Here's another one here. Gravitational lensing. This is near the water area of the lake in Puerto Rico. And we see that sort of gravitational lensing, this shape shift of the terrain behind it. But that but it's not the terrain doing that, it's the craft that's doing this in its missions. Here's other footage, which is probably better actually. You can see the slight shift. Using those lines is very useful because you can see the distortion in the shape. This is not compressed video where you'd also might see a distortion. This is uncompressed. This is raw data that's been analyzed. Okay, okay. This is part of the object itself. It appears to be rotating. You can see this sort of bubble around it. The shape changes slightly. This is from Lima in Peru. This would be civilian private aircraft filmed this, and also it's filmed from the ground as well. And you can see that the recording of this distortion of the craft itself. These may well be robotic probes in most instances that are recorded. Here's a comparison of the Lima images and also what was taken in Boyle. There's similarities in the actual construct itself, this plasma ball type of shape. So this leads into, because of the propulsion system, I think, using this type of process, that it sort of fits in with previous research that has been done. There's what's called the Alcubierre faster than light propulsion system. And in that, no, I just put an image of a craft in there, which would depict actually what is happening here. So in actual fact, the shape of a flying saucer is probably the right shape to have, not something that's a square platform or a triangle, but having a flying saucer type shape fits this. And it's no surprise that these have been recorded, like the Billy Mayer case, for example. There's 6 variations of these type of craft. This is actually a Billy Mayer picture, but it's been modified to depict this, what I think actually is what they're doing from the physics that we understand now from UFOs. Okay, this is something different. This is all the UAP databases that I've been using. There's about 500,000 reports altogether, but enormous amount of these are subjective. There's a certain amount which show radar data, but in my days, way back 30 years ago, you wouldn't have had anything like this. The maximum you could find 15,000 reports, maybe. This is a simulation of what I think actually is how they're monitoring the Earth. Now, this is based on some assumptions here, based on altitudes of 38 and 79 kilometers, with an orbit of 85 minutes. Now, I said previously in another model that it was 65 minutes, but this works using the 85-minute revolution. We have the velocities as well. And we're also using accepted software tools as well. And this was from NASA, the NASA General Mission Analysis Tool, GMAT. So this has been presented and everybody's comfortable about it. 4 months ago. So, you know, a 100-day simulation showing an object in a stable sun synchronous retrograde polar orbit. with that inclination of 82 degrees. So we've done a lot more since then. And if everything goes well, that this will be presented with a lot more data in December of 2024 in Washington.
Brilliant.
So that's some of the past papers I had published, got published, I mean, in journals, as far back as 1992 to deal with cycles and patterns of UFOs. And then the 2001, which was a highly controversial paper. That's another story, but it was published eventually. And then in an academic book, which I was another co-author on, Communicating with Extraterrestrial Intelligence Behind the UAP. So that's an area that I'm really interested in. So that came out, that was accepted. And then here's submitted papers, others published already. There was one published there to dealing with the plasmoids or plasma balls in low Earth orbits and also within our atmosphere. Normally, okay, this came out of the Journal of Modern Physics. This is dealing with extraterrestrial life in space, dealing with plasmoids within the thermosphere. That's one of the layers below the outer space near to the Earth, where the ISS would be. Normally, you get about 1,000 reads. We got 120,000.
That's because I shared it.
That was published in February, and not only that, it was suppressed, or how should I put it? It was, I suppose, you could say, yeah. And Google and other places, there was a lot of interaction there in Reddit, and all that was wiped out.
Yeah.
So that's what we're dealing with. But 120,000 reads we got, and this was a scientific paper. It's about 50 pages.
Yeah,
at least. It wouldn't be a normal paper you would read and say, "Oh God, what are they talking about here?"
Yeah.
Well, okay. So we're very excited that that happened. I mean, it sort of proved that, okay, there's folks out there not happy with this kind of work we're doing. Another one that's just gone to press now is, could UAP be technosignatures for monitoring purposes? That was at the symposium there in the UK. That's coming out in the Cambridge Press. So it's in press at the moment. That's really good. I was very happy about that.
Right.
And then we've just got accepted. The abstract was accepted for a much bigger conference, the AGU 2024, Possible Signatures Around the Earth. That's for planetary science, advancing the search for exoplanetary and solar system technosignatures. That's a session in that. There's about 20,000 scientists involved in this. All right, it's a big conference. All right, you get these massive conferences, and these are you'd expect about 10,000 at it or something like that. So it'll be different to the symposium in the UK. That was only a fraction of that, but this is a really important one. I'm actually dealing with the session chairman at the moment. He wants me to change various words, within it. Be acceptable. Another one coming up, myself and another colleague, friend, Dr. Hugh Deasy, an Irish guy, and we've been working on the Alcubierre type propulsion system. And this is based on the UAP physics. And this is for the first European Interstellar Conference in Luxembourg, coming up in December of this year. There's an abstract, hopefully will be accepted, post-contact communications with the UAP, Routledge Publishing, 2025. The chair of that has just come back to me. They're looking at the abstract at the moment. And this would be for a full chapter within this book, an academic book, that is. All right. So that's where I'm coming from and all this stuff. So there you go.
Thank you, Eamonn. Amazing. Let's we shrink that down. Or stop share.
There you go.
Well, that was very comprehensive, and where you're going is really interesting. Taking all that knowledge, the quantum communication side of it is very exciting.
Very much. Yeah, we've been at the quantum communication concept design since 2018. Um, and as we speak now, we're um, this, I'd say by September, if all, if everything works out, we may have a breakthrough in that.
Well, that'd
To
be
be able
amazing. It'd be like the first phone call, Alexander Graham Bell across the Atlantic, except out there. But it makes sense, doesn't it? Yeah.
So the quantum communications is the way to go for the whole UFO area. That's what I'm getting at, because when you go into the quantum mechanics, it's to do with consciousness.
Yeah.
So one leads into the other. But, you know, even if you're doing the astrophysical approach and bringing in the contactees, you may not need instrumentation. It might be okay to use some sort of device on the contactees, you know, skull head, so that one can actually research what's going on here in the interaction with the extraterrestrials. You know. There
Well,
is a paper that came out by my friend Dr. Massimo Teodorani back in 2003, because in his work in Hesteland in Norway, he was finding that when a UFO would appear and they had a triangle that appeared, people, and these are scientists now, that they were very uncomfortable,
yeah.
and also they went into a negative state, which is
Mm.
weird. You know,
Mm.
they shouldn't have emotions in this. You know, if you're a scientist, you know. I know Massimo very well. Uh, he's actually put Massimo is one of the rare ones where he's had encounters when he was a young guy, you know, by the extraterrestrial. So it's like, you know, what's the big deal for him? You know, he's a cool-headed guy, and you know, he's yeah. Anyway,
Well, that's been my own experience. Telepathic connection, instant, and there's not even any words. It's just the knowing and a feeling, and exploring that is the most important part of this. So that's why I'm very privileged to be in the same town as you and be able to have a chat like this. Yeah. Lot, you know, I'm going to leave this to the viewers to leave their comments, and maybe if you're watching this and you've got questions for Eamonn, maybe we could do a follow-up Q&A down the line, and maybe an update after some of these symposiums and talks. They're all very exciting. But in the meantime, I know that you put a lot of effort into that, and I know it's a big thing to share some of this stuff, especially after what you've been through over the last 35 years. And it's very much appreciated, Eamonn. And I think on behalf of everybody watching this, I want to thank you for your work. You're a very special human being, and we're privileged to have you you're doing it in such a unique way that it's just a real privilege to observe. And yeah, and being on your doorstep is just hilarious for me. It's brilliant. So thank you very much, and I wish you all the best of luck with these the new setup, and the quantum communications breakthrough, and the talks, because they take a lot of energy, and I know you put a lot of work into them. So that's, you know, amazing how you've managed to keep scientific credibility at the same time as you're walking two paths at the same time. Is brilliant.
indeed. Well, thanks, Mark, for inviting me to this. Usually when I don't do many interviews, as you
I
probably
know.
gather. And secondly, usually when I'm giving a presentation, it's at a conference that's usually with professional scientists. So, but look, things are changing now, so that's why I was quite happy to come on board and present, you know, to your audience.
Well, I think it's great, and it's not nice. It's good to have a presentation where I can just sit back and listen instead of yabbering, because it's all about learning at this stage. And I do feel like this work is critical to where we're at, where humankind is at right now. It does feel very imminent, and I think the timing of all of this is very, special as well. So thank you very much again. Thank you everybody for watching. And if do you want, is there, I know a lot of your websites aren't up at the moment. Are there ways for people to engage with you, or do you want to just keep a low profile and stay away from them?
Yeah, I'm very much low profile. Yeah.
We'll keep it that. We'll keep
Yeah,
it at that then.
I'm not on. I mean, you know, I'm not on Facebook and all
I
these
know you're
things.
not.
You know, I've never, as you probably know. Um, I'm not that way inclined. I don't need social interaction, if you know what I mean.
No, I know. Yeah, that's but
It's
that's why
like,
it's so important to get your
I
stuff
don't,
out there.
I don't need 1,000 friends out there. You know, it's like, oh, okay. I mean, my main thing is to get friendly with these guys up there. You know, that's where I'm coming from.
Well, same here.
So,
I'm getting more reclusive as I get older as well.
yeah.
But thank you again, and thanks everybody for watching, and take care. We'll see you soon. We'll see you soon, Eamonn.
Okay. Bye-bye now.
Bye bye. Bye bye.